Oh, good evening, everybody, or good morning, depending on which part of this beautiful globe that you're on. This is a very special Rebel News live stream where, for the first time ever, Avi Yamini joins us from Down Under. I normally co-host with my friend David Menzies, who is just up there. Hi, David.
Hey,
He's
Sheila.
Hey,
Avi.
he's in the
Wow.
studio.
It's
He's
like
in the studio in Toronto. I'm in Alberta, Canada, and Avi Yamini is way down under. How's it going, guys?
It's fantastic, Sheila. I feel like this is a giant size issue of Marvel Team Up in which 3, not 2, team up. And I'm so happy to see Avi. The last time I saw Avi was in September of last year in Israel. And you know, Avi, it seems like a century ago, given what happened just weeks after we departed. The world seemed so much normal back then. Had we known there was going to be a massacre on the 7th, I wonder if we would have stuck around for that or not, given the air travel restrictions. But I guess I'm on a long-winded tangerine to say, hey, great to see you again, Avi.
I miss you too, Dave. Good to see you all the time. And I know in Israel you had to look right down to see me, and you made that point daily. But no, I'm really excited about this today.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I should tell everybody what we're doing here and how they can get involved. So, as I said, this is a very special Rebel News live stream. We are watching the U.S. presidential debates together tonight. So, Republican nominee, former President Donald Trump will be debating current vice president. I'm not sure who's actually running the country right now, but we know for sure she's the current vice president, Kamala. I'm not sure how to say her name, and I've never quite learned because I don't care. Kamala Harris. And so we're going to all see together the presidential debate, wherein just, I guess, a couple of months from now, Americans are going to decide if they are going to choose a leader even stupider, I think, and that's my personal opinion, than Justin Trudeau, or they will choose Donald Trump. So that's what we're going to do tonight. For you to get involved, if you are watching us on Rumble, thank you for being there. If you're watching us on YouTube, I want you to know that YouTube is a censorship platform, as in Rebel News is completely demonetized over there. But we do have 1.6 million plus viewers over there. We don't want to abandon you. YouTube wants us gone. That's one of the main reasons we stay. But if you want to support the work that we do and support a free speech platform that lets you have your say, might I suggest you go over on to Rumble, because on Rumble you can leave something called a super chat, and that's their paid chat that supports the work that we do, because we will never take a penny from any form of government, not just in Canada, but also around the world. And so we rely on our viewers at home. So if your super chat is over the $5 US cutoff, we are hereby obligating ourselves to read it and comment about it on air. But don't let that be the bar for entry, because we frequently read the comments that are under that US $5 bar for entry, but we even read the free ones too, if you guys are clever, funny. So what does that mean? Get chatting. Now we will We're going to talk a little bit about what we think we're going to see tonight. I think maybe some predictions. We might have some special guests. We'll have some messages from some sponsors for you. And then we'll stick around at the end to find out how much stupider we are after listening to Kamala Harris try to formulate some sentences for the better part of a couple hours against Donald Trump. Guys, let me ask you what your predictions are for tonight. Kamala is not great when she's put on the spot. She's not great in interviews. I think she's going to be even worse in this debate. What are you expecting from tonight? I'm expecting a bit of an axe murdering.
Well, Sheila, I can tell you, as you well know, for days she's been holed up in a hotel, practicing, memorizing talking points, because you're not allowed to bring notes in. You're not allowed any kind of helpers like that. And, there is such a thing, I think, in debating as over-preparing to the point where you choke. And Donald Trump is a seasoned pro, and I think he's refined his game going back to July with his debate with Biden. And you raise a good point. And I hate to be impolite with my questions, but where is the current president? I believe he's somewhere in California. What is he doing? Having ice cream, making sandcastles? I don't know. Pouting that he's still not going to be the candidate for the Democrats. But I thought it was quite remarkable how restrained Donald Trump was. And I think if I was giving advice to former President Trump, it would simply be this. And I think and I don't think I'm telling him anything new, because I think we did see it in the debate in July against President Biden. And that is, don't go for any ad hominem attacks. Stick to the issues. And my goodness, aren't the issues incredible? War all over the globe, right? Inflation running away, interest rates, crime, millions upon millions of illegal aliens coming into the United States of America. And, Sheila and Avi, as far as I'm concerned, it's the age-old question, whether you're Republican, Democrat, independent, or you simply don't care. You don't get involved in elections. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And I don't see how anyone, well, aside from, I don't know, executives with certain pharmaceutical companies, thanks to COVID, can say, oh no, it's just so jolly good. So that would be my advice if I was coaching the president. And also, don't take any bait to make you get angry, because I am sure, Sheila and Abby, that at some point Kamala Harris is going to say words along the lines of, well, coming from a convicted felon. And,
for sure.
And I would say, if I'm Donald Trump, I would say, this speaks a lot about your character. This was a frame up, a stitch up job. That when I get into the White House, this outrageous miscarriage of justice is going to be overturned. That's what I would say. And again, with the ad hominem attacks, you remember the late, great Maggie Thatcher, she was asked that question: how do you feel when somebody insults you or makes a joke of you about your looks, for example? And she said words to the effect of, well, I'm quite delighted, because it means I've won the debate. That if you have to resort to personal attacks, ad hominem attacks, then you don't have anything to say about the issues. So once again, I would say, if I'm Trump, compare what's happened in the last 4 years and talk about what life was like for Americans in his period of 2016 to 2020, in terms of no recession, interest rates low, America energy independent for the first time in 70 years, no illegal immigration crisis like we see on the southern border of the US, and relative world peace. I think Donald Trump surprised a lot of people by being such a dove. Yes, the administration took out a couple of bad actors from afar, but there was nothing like what we're seeing in Ukraine, Russia, Hamas, Israel, and China increasingly rattling its saber. So that would be the game plan I would embrace going forward. As far as what Kamala Harris is going to do, well, we're going to find out what several days of being locked in a hotel room, reciting talking points over and over again is going to present in tonight's debate.
Yeah, I think that the RNC is going to be fresh and hot and spicy with the clips tonight of the crazy things she says. Abby, what do you think we're going to see tonight? And also, I want to ask you, do Australians watch American politics as closely as we do here in Justin Trudeau's maple syrup, North Korea?
Totally. And I'm not being rude. I'm actually just sharing the live stream across my social media. It wasn't that you were just boring me, Menzies. I think you made some valid points. But no, I think Australians are very connected, especially this one. Yeah. This election, because of where we find ourselves currently, the world's, where we are in 2024, the state of the world. But also, it does have Donald Trump, so there is the theater to it that's exciting to most people. I'm speaking for myself as well, I guess. But at the moment, as I'm sitting here talking to you guys, there's essentially war breaking out on Melbourne streets because there's a conference, a weapons conference here, and you know how the anti-war group have been rallying for a year. They don't want anyone to have weapons except for Hamas. So there's literally I'm watching it on the side here, and you can just see, that was what you've got up on the screen. That's just that was this morning before it even started. So you've got all these groups from Antifa, Students for Palestine, the Greens, everybody's wearing keffiyeh. You got Extinction Rebellion all in keffiyehs today because Israel is somehow a threat to global warming as well. It's mental gymnastics, but I guess it comes back to this debate. Americans have a choice here, and it's quite clear where we sit on this issue and on this election, but it's serious because you can either vote for more of what we're seeing play out on Melbourne streets as we speak now, or they can vote in somebody that's going to bring back world peace, somebody that had no new wars, somebody that knew how to keep Russia in check, somebody who knew how to deal with those who knew no terrorists, no Iran, nobody was messing with him. And I guess what we're going to see tonight, I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping Trump brings his A game. I guess he probably doesn't even need to bring that much of an A game. He just needs to let her talk.
Yes.
What wasn't it? Wasn't she advocating that they don't silence his mic? Do I remember that correctly? They were fighting about the rules, and she wanted his mic on. And I don't blame her, because what she would want more than anything is to be interrupted. Yep. The last thing she wants is to have this locked in period of time where she has to speak to the camera. We haven't seen that yet. Yep. Not once since this campaign, since she's taken over Joe Biden's position, since they swapped her over. We have not seen her speaking without a teleprompter, without even the CNN interview, I believe, was 40 minutes. She had Goofy Waltz next to her, holding her hand, but it was filmed for 40 minutes, and they only aired 18 minutes. I reckon most of the world wants to see the other 22 minutes of that recording, because that's what we're likely going to see today, is her fumbling everything.
Oh, yeah, I think you're right, Abby. And by the way, before we
David, I've got to cut you off. I've got to cut you off before you dig into that, because that's my job here tonight. I was warned that I have to be the brakes to everybody else's gas pedal. So before we go ahead with that, we've got a message from a sponsor that we need to get to. It's from 5G Free. And it piggybacks directly on something Abby just said. Who's running the place? Who's running America right now? Joe Biden is dementia addled, and if he's too unwell to run a presidential campaign, why is he still running the country? And is he even still running the country? I think we should all be very worried about the safety of not just America, but probably the free world. Now, I want to talk about some things that people are afraid to say out loud. Who's in control of America's nukes? It's not Biden, which is chilling, because if not Biden, then whom? Meanwhile, we have Russian ships off the coast of Florida and full-blown wars in Ukraine and Israel. The world is at its most unstable since World War II, and with nuclear weapons, the stakes are even 10 times higher. How do people like you and I stay safe? Every prepper, and you guys know I'm one, needs to have Radio Guard ACE, the only FDA-approved drug to treat radioactive fallout. Only the feds have it until now. That's why Rumble partnered with 5G Free, the only company in the world that has a supply of Radio Guard ACE and the ability to prescribe it prophylactically. What a fun word to say. Get their radiation emergency kit with Radio Guard ACE, potassium iodide, Zofran, and a Geiger counter. There's simply no other tool in your arsenal to protect against a radioactive threat. Go to 5gfree.com, code STUDIO, to save 15% and to get your radiation kit now. Let's go. David, sorry to have cut you off. I'm sure you had something very, very important to say. Let's hear it.
Maybe not important, but I'm just so curious about the clip Avi ran with those Antifa types throwing things at the police horses. What were they throwing, Avi? And, oh, by the way, not to be impolite, but where is PETA on this matter?
Forget PETA. Part of the groups that are rallying today is Animal Justice Party.
Where's the justice for that white horse?
It's the hypocrisy of this group, the level of insanity. Like one rule for us, it's everything about it is full of contradictions. But yeah, they don't care. Look at them. They're throwing manure in that one. There's other ones where they were throwing the I don't know what you guys call them, the cones that go on the side of the roads. So there's already a couple of officers injured. That at the moment it looks like police are finally, and I just tweeted that out now because after you think about it, it's been a year that these people have held our city hostage. Melbourne is known as the protest city, protest capital of the world. And in the last year, we've really lived up to that name here. And on the screen you're seeing now is finally riot police, after a year, have moved in on this group because they can see this anti-war group are out for war. But it's just insane to me that it took a year. It took a year. They let them escalate every single week. We've seen violence from this mob. In fact, we just did a story over the weekend where a busker, a musician on the street who was just trying to make money by having his little, bucket where you put money in, and he was playing the violin, and he got bashed. He got assaulted with a metal pole because he was in their way of their marching protest, their weekly protest. This violent mob, we need to stand up to them now, and we needed to stand up to them a year ago. But I think as this debate plays out, it'll be playing out on the streets of Melbourne, and I think it's almost perfect. This is the difference. This is the contrast we have. You have Kamala, who on one hand, she plays to that crowd. She wants that crowd. That is her crowd, and she encourages them. And then on the other side, you have Donald Trump, who says we need to crack down on this crowd.
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing here in Canada too. And yeah, there ain't nobody as violent as a peacenik. Every time. But we see the same thing here in Canada too. And it's part of the backlash against Justin Trudeau. It's one of the reasons why he's just plummeting in the polls and the Conservatives are surging. Is besides all the other issues of affordability and just generally being a laughing stock on the world stage, when I think Canadians were sort of well respected, that we're far from that now. But it is that it's dangerous to be a Canadian now. Our cities are dangerous, and it's even more dangerous to be Jewish in Canada, especially in Canada's large cities. And that has been allowed to happen and then foment, proliferate, and expand under the inaction of Justin Trudeau. It's the same thing happening under the Biden administration. It's the same thing happening in Australia. And I say, bring on the backlash. I can't wait for it.
And yet, Sheila, what I find fascinating, I want to hear your opinion on this, as well as Avi, of course, who once upon a time served in the IDF over in Israel. Recent polls show that the majority of Jews in the United States of America are going to indeed be voting Democrat, as per usual. How do you square that circle, given what's happening in the Hamas-Israel war, and the fact that when the Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu came to the U.S. last month, Kamala Harris snubbed him, didn't show up to his talks. This is no friend of the Jewish people, and yet for some reason that I cannot fathom, the majority of Jews in America are going to cast a ballot for Democrat. What are your theories?
Well, I'm going to ask you to put a pin in that question for our guest who's joining us in about 10 minutes.
Yes.
But I think it's habitual. For example, you and I have seen this firsthand, although to a far less extent here in Alberta, because it's all but a Liberal wipeout here. But there are ridings in Toronto that, despite the homelessness and crime in the riding, despite the fact that there's a homeless person sleeping at the Liberal constituency office, those people in that riding will still vote Liberal. And they will see the degradation of their community and just say, well, this is what we've always done. And so we continue to do it. And then they wonder why things never get better. I think there's some of that there. It's just, it's habitual.
Yeah. What's your take, Avi, in terms of even with this election, even with what's going on across the pond, American Jews are going to cast a ballot for the Democrats, according to polls, at least? Do we have Avi's audio?
Sorry about that. Yeah, no, I question those polls. I saw something. I saw a Jewish Democrats poll. I'd trust that as much as I trust the Democratic Party themselves. But it's no secret the Jewish community overwhelmingly has been full of Democrats. I think in this election there's going to be a massive swing, and that's just from the feel that I get in the community itself, even here in Australia. You know, recently I walked up to Temple Mount with my brother, who would have been, he was the most anti-Trump person on the planet. I think he had to send his kids, he was a typical liberal Jew. He probably had to send his kids to counseling now that he's supporting Trump's. I think that is an example that you see across the Jewish community. So I don't know if I believe any poll that says the majority of Jews, even in America, are voting Democrats. I think the majority of Jews since October 7 are hurting, not just about what happened on October 7, but also about the response of the world, and especially world leaders, and especially the Biden-Harris administration. They speak, through this whole period, they've been talking from both sides of their mouths. On one hand, they're saying, yes, we support Israel's right to self-defense. On the other hand, they're saying they need to stop the genocide. Yes, we need to pull Israel in. And to the average Jew anywhere in the world, including in America, what they're feeling is, gosh, I've got to be careful where I walk on the streets nowadays, because if somebody identifies me as a Jew, whether it's because I'm wearing a kippah, or if they're secular Jews, even if I've got a symbol of a Star of David or something, they have become legitimate target according to these people that are rallying against a fake genocide, that are backed by the Biden and Harris. Whether the majority are still voting Democrat or not, I'd question that. But what I can guarantee you is that for the first time in history, you're going to have a massive swing from the Jewish community to the Republican Party.
Well, Avi, I hope you're right. And to your other question, when you began your answer, are the polls correct? I think that is a huge question. And because I'm a little older than you two youngsters, I remember very vividly the 1980 US election. It was the Jimmy Carter Democrats against the Ronald Reagan Republicans. And there was also a considerable force, an independent candidate by the name of John Anderson. And right up to the eve of Election Day, if memory serves, the major polls were saying that Jimmy Carter was ahead by 2 points, still in the threshold. It was a landslide. I believe Reagan won something like 44 states in the 1980 election. So my question is, are we about to see history repeat itself? Certainly Kamala Harris, after the DNC, she had a bump in popularity, was taking the lead in some polls, just single digit, of course. Since then, she's gone down 7 points with independent voters, which is a very important demographic, especially with the 7 swing states. But I'm wondering, are we in for a repeat of 1980, that come election night, we're going to be shocked that it's not a photo finish horse race, but maybe a potential landslide for former President Trump?
Isn't that what we saw in 2016?
Mm.
Isn't that exactly what we saw in 2016? We don't have to go back to the year after I was born to see the media get everything wrong. They got everything wrong in 2016.
He likes to reminisce about the old days. But 2016 was even more. Didn't they have Hillary by a landslide, according to the polls?
Hillary by a landslide. We were on air. We watched it happen.
Yeah, so I think that's even. I think that's a better example than what you're giving from the
archives of David's
archives from before, what year did you say?
1980, you cheeky monkey.
1980. That's before I was born, mate.
But I'll tell you what's different between.
How old were you then?
Pardon me?
How old were you in 1980?
Well, I was in high school, okay? So I wasn't quite as old as you're inferring, Avi. But, I'll tell you why.
Settle down, Grandpa. Settle down.
I'll tell you why.
I don't want you to have a Biden moment on us.
Yeah.
Well, that's yet to come. The night is young.
Careful your ticker, David. Careful.
And but this dovetails into why I think this debate is so important. You've seen Kamala Harris employ the Biden strategy. She's somewhere in a basement, somewhere in a hotel room, not giving interviews, which I think is a dereliction of duty. The American people should know what you stand for. But the media, the mainstream media that is in the US, have become basically the propaganda arm for the Democrat Party. And look at this. It was published the other day in Newsbusters. It was a new study by the Media Research Center. And this debate is being carried by ABC Disney, total fanboys for the Democrats. But they looked at ABC World News Tonight coverage from the day Harris entered the race on July 21 through September 6. And Harris received, you're not going to believe this number, 100% positive spin. In the same period, this very same news network, Trump received 7% positive spin, meaning that he received 93% negative spin. For CBS, 94% positive for Harris. For NBC, 71% positive for Harris. What I'm getting at is the mainstream media is not doing its job. They are not telling Americans how radical Kamala Harris is. They are whitewashing this. There, as I like to say about some of the print journalists, how do you type on a typewriter when you're wearing pom-poms for the Democrat Party? At least finally tonight, even on friendly home turf of ABC, which I think is the worst of the worst in terms of mainstream media for being cheerleaders for the Democrat Party, we can see Trump and Kamala Harris go toe to toe. Anyway, that's why I think this is an important debate. And it's the only one, if I recall.
Yep.
I know there's going to be Tim Vance is going to be taking on Tampon Tim a little later on. But those are my thoughts.
When you're talking about the ABC positive spin, it's interesting because here our broadcaster, taxpayer funded broadcaster, ABC as well. Yesterday I saw them discussing this debate, and it was wild because the election expert that they brought on, the US election expert, basically said, so they were saying what we're going to expect of this, predicting what to expect from this debate, and it was many myths, truths from Donald Trump, a lot of misinformation and disinformation, and a lot of personal attacks. And the question is how Harris deals with the personal attacks. And I'm just like, this is so wild. There's just they're not even pretending.
No,
and
more to David's point. David said they're not doing their job. That is, if you think their job is telling the truth, but I don't think they think their job is telling the truth. Their job is to be the undeclared press secretaries to carry water for the Democrat Party. I know that our guest is on the line. So David, you have that very good question that I think you are best suited to ask him, and he's best suited to answer, but we need to go to an ad break so he can come on.
Here is my kind of passport, folks. Look at this beauty. Introducing a new special edition Freedom Passport. What if the greatest teacher of all time framed his message as a constitution for a kingdom of love, faith, and freedom? Inspired by Jesus' teachings in the Sermon on the Mount, this special edition Freedom Passport captures the foundational truths of love and freedom for all. It's a powerful reminder of Jesus' call to love one another that you can carry with you every day. Join the movement, share the truth, and spread the love with your family and friends. Get your Freedom Passport today at freedompassport.ca. That's freedompassport.ca. All orders in North America come with free shipping and a complimentary song with each purchase.
When the panel said, listen, give it to 6-month-old babies with zero assurances this possibly would be safe, I said, where were you the day when the WHO came out and said, do not use remdesivir in the hospital? I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. Join me for an evening together. Tickets are on sale now.
Why should you join Canada's National Firearms Association? We currently have one of the most aggressively anti-firearm governments in our nation's history, promoting fear and placing blame like never before. Our rights, freedoms, culture, and heritage, it's all on the line. But we are fighting back, and there is strength in numbers. We work within the law to change the law, to defend competitors, hunters, collectors, and other law-abiding firearms owners. We can get through this. We've done it before, and we'll do it again, if you are with us. Canada's National Firearms Association. Freedom, safety, responsibility.
Okay, well, I should let you know that our sponsor for our Rebel News Live coming up in Calgary at the beginning of October is the National Firearms Association. So I love their ads. They're very patriotic. They make me feel very good to be a Canadian, but also to be a Canadian gun owner. But as you can see, we have somebody new. We pushed Avi out. We brought in our friend Joel Pollak from Breitbart. For those of you who don't know, our friend Joel is the senior editor at large at Breitbart. He's also the host of Breitbart News on Sirius XM, and accomplished author. And I think as close as we are going to get here at Rebel News to an expert on American politics, and particularly the nexus of Democratic policies and how they make your cities terrible. Joel, thanks for coming on the show. My friend David had a very interesting question, and it was about the propensity for, I think, the Jewish community to just continue to vote Democrat on and on and on. But Abby said, that's changing. What's your take?
Well, there'll be a bit of a shift in this election, and it's good to see you again, by the way. I don't think we've seen each other for a year since we were all in Israel together in a very different time and place. But it's going to shift. I think you're going to see Trump win maybe 35% of the Jewish vote. That's up from 30% in 2020, and that was up from 24% in 2016. So I do think there are a number of Jews who are shifting over to the Republican side. They're very distressed about the anti-Semitism on the left, which has continued now as college campuses have reopened for the fall semester. And they're very concerned about the Biden-Harris administration's policy toward Israel. So I do think you're going to see a shift. However, I also think that many American Jews are simply Democrats first before anything else. And they are not necessarily closely connected to the Jewish community, perhaps not even necessarily concerned about Israel to a great extent. And they are going to stick with the Democratic Party. In fact, there are even some Jews who might have voted for Trump over Biden who are now going to vote for Kamala Harris over Trump, not because of anything she's done or hasn't done, but simply because they understood that Biden was too weak and they are uncomfortable with making the switch. Kamala Harris, at least, is a Democrat who they can feel will actually be able to serve in office. And so they're comfortable staying within the fold.
And, Joel, I got to ask you something. Speaking of things that are shifting, I want to get your take on what Kamala Harris has been saying when she says anything at all, that is. She's hardly given any press conferences, which I think is despicable. But you see her attitude towards things like fracking, border security, Medicare for all. She's not a hardliner for those things. And I used to think, why isn't the likes of Bernie Sanders, why isn't the squad screaming mad about this? And then 2 days ago, Bernie Sanders himself gave an interview, and he was asked about Kamala Harris's decision to moderate her views on issues like fracking and Medicare for all. And he said that this was pragmatic. Here's the quote. Harris is doing what she thinks is right in order to win the election, end quote. And I thought that was absolutely staggering. He's basically saying, unless I'm misreading that quote, oh, don't worry, squad, don't worry, Bernie. I'm just saying this to the rubes out there before Election Day. Once the ballots are counted and I'm president, I'll come back on the reservation. What do you say, my friend?
Well, he's absolutely right. And look, we are used to presidential candidates running to the extremes in the primary and then coming back toward the center in the general election. Joe Biden actually was an exception to that. He ran to the left in the primary and then kept on going. And that's because he relied on Bernie Sanders's base, the left-wing progressive base of the party, to motivate voters. He was not inspiring to most young Democrats, to most of the party activists. He was on good terms with the donors and the establishment, but he was not connecting with the base. So he had to continue to flatter the left. And he did actually change his policies and become further left, if people remember that, over the course of the 2020 election. When I wrote my book about the 2020 Democratic primary, Red November, I predicted that Joe Biden would be the most left-wing president in American history, and few other people shared that prediction at the time, but I do believe I was correct. What Bernie Sanders and the squad have gambled on is that they can do better inside an administration or with connections to and support for an administration that isn't going to check all the boxes for them, but that is at least going to have an open door to them. And I think they understand that Kamala Harris just needs to get elected, and then she can open the door to the squad, to the left. You can see it in the people she's hiring. If you take the issue of Israel, which we mentioned briefly earlier, Kamala Harris says her policy is not going to be too different from Joe Biden's. That is to say, some support for Israel, but also some criticism, and of course, flattering the Palestinian cause where necessary. But look at who she's hiring. She's hired rabidly anti-Israel staffers, both for her positions of liaison to the Jewish community and liaison to the Muslim and Arab communities. Her national security advisor is thought to have close ties with a pro-Iranian lobbyist. So the people she's hiring, the people she's relying on for advice, are far to the left. So it really doesn't matter what her policy statements are now. People know her as a left-winger. I think it's not so much that she's a radical leftist, although there's that element. I do think she favors that point of view, but I think she's just simply a climber, very, very ambitious.
Yeah.
She will do whatever it takes to get elected, as Bernie Sanders said. And he meant it as a compliment. I mean, kind of an ode to her ruthlessness. But this is the issue. Americans right now feel adrift. We are facing problems of the sort that we haven't faced really since the 2008 recession. And even though our unemployment rate is low, our inflation rate has come down a bit, and there are reasons for optimism. We also have price levels that are very high. Interest rates are very high. People are struggling to afford basic necessities. The world is falling apart, and we have a young generation that doesn't seem to have confidence in the future. So people are looking for leadership. And the reason that switching your positions is a bad idea right now in this particular environment is that it suggests you don't really have a sense of where you want to lead the country. You just want to be as inoffensive as possible. There are years where that's the right move. This is not one of those years. And some people on the progressive left are starting to say, this is not working. You're slipping in the polls again. What you need to do at this debate is come out and be loud and proud and progressive and leftist, and don't worry about the people you're going to offend, because the people who are going to vote for you are going to stick with you, but at least stand for something. So if you follow some of the progressive voices, and I'm quoting the New Republic, which is a left-wing publication, they came out and said, look, all that Kamala Harris has done is copy and paste Biden's positions into her own. They literally found that she had copy and pasted Biden's campaign website policies onto hers 7 weeks after joining the campaign. First time she ever had any policies on her website. They're saying this isn't good enough. You can't avoid the press. You can't avoid taking a stand. Take a stand, be progressive, be who you are, or at least you told us you were back in 2019 when you ran for president the last time, and be somebody. They understand that she's losing. And you can look at the polls and they're neck and neck and so forth, but she's running a losing campaign because she's not pivoting hard enough to the middle to convince moderates that she really is a moderate, but she's leaving the left behind and giving them all kinds of indications that she doesn't really care about them. The smart ones, again, are trying to have it both ways. They're trying to have her moderate so she can get elected and then get into her administration so that they can enact their left-wing policies. That's, again, why if you look at her hiring, she's hiring these radical staffers. That's the move they're making. But they first have to get elected. And I think the country right now wants a strong leader, and that's where she's undermining her own case.
And Joel, you raise an excellent point. Is if I'm to ask you to look into a crystal ball and predict what Kamala Harris's strategy is going to be in the debate that's just minutes away, is that what you think she's going to do? Is she going to come out as a loud and proud progressive, or is it going to be middle of the road muddling?
The first priority for Kamala Harris in the debate is to appear presidential. So she has not passed that bar just yet. Her speech at the Democratic National Convention was okay, it was well delivered, but it lacked any kind of presidential vision or sense of gravitas. What she has to do is square up to Donald Trump and look presidential, because remember, this is the person we are going to put in the Oval Office potentially, who has to face off against Vladimir Putin, against Xi Jinping, against the mullahs in Iran and all kinds of other people. She's going to have to look tough, and she's going to project an air of seriousness. She's going to draw on her career as a prosecutor. She doesn't have a great record, but she does have a career as a prosecutor, and she's going to draw on that. If you look at the debate that she had with Mike Pence, who was then the vice president in 2020, she did rather well at projecting that sense of seriousness, and she does read talking points fairly well. She memorizes what she has to say. So I think she will get the basics done. After all, if you're not going to be giving press conferences, if you're not going to be talking to the media or even asking the voters for their vote over 7+ weeks, you may as well be rehearsing for the debate. And I think she is and has been. And so I think she's going to clear the bar basically of appearing presidential. What she has to try to do beyond that is to reach out to moderate and independent voters, such as there are, and convince them that she's not going to be a left-wing disaster, while at the same time projecting a sense of leadership that can at least excite the left-wing base. That's a very, very tough needle to thread. And I don't think she's going to do it there. I do think she will fall short in convincing these various groups of the electorate that she is the right choice. So I think we're probably going to see more of the same, a solid performance by Kamala Harris, but not enough to win over the independent voters and the swing state voters that she needs to win the election.
Yeah, I think she'll do well if she keeps her tackle in check. She does rely on those crutch phrases that get repeated over and over again. But I wanted to ask you, I mean, at the end of the day, how she's Joe Biden's vice president. And a few moments ago, you gave a laundry list of why things are so much worse off in America than when Biden and Harris took office. So how does she disconnect herself from the policies of the administration where she's the vice president? How does she do that in this debate, or is that even possible?
It's not possible. It actually is not possible. If she had declared her candidacy earlier on, you know, Al Gore faced this problem when he ran for president and he had been serving under Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was a very popular president, but in the last couple of years of his presidency, he had the Monica Lewinsky affair, he had the impeachment, and he had the dot-com bust. And Al Gore tried to distance himself from Bill Clinton and did so rather successfully. He did win the popular vote and probably would have won the presidency if the Florida ballots hadn't been so strange. They were overseen by Democrats, of course. But the issue with Harris is that she has been so late to the game. She has not had time to establish a clear political identity of her own until July, just 2 months ago, less than 2 months ago, really. She was defending Joe Biden's policies to the hilt, and the White House has been saying that they expect continuity between her policies and his. So there really has not been time for her to establish a different identity. I don't think she's going to be able to do that. The main thrust of her argument is going to be, we can't go back to another 4 years of Donald Trump. That is, in fact, the sort of unofficial slogan of the Democrats this year. We're not going back. And they mean back to the 1950s, back to whatever primordial helltopia they imagine America was before they were born or whatever. But Donald Trump is seen as something that unifies the Democratic Party. She's going to make her case against him rather than for herself. If she does make a strong case for herself in some way, and I think she may rely on her career as a prosecutor to do so, that's something different from Joe Biden, then maybe she can make a stronger case. I don't think she's going to do it. She hasn't done it so far.
And Joel, if I can, we discussed this earlier. How much faith do you have in the polls? So many polls indicate that this horse race might be a photo finish. And I'm getting a profound sense of deja vu all the way back to 1980, the Jimmy Carter Democrats versus the Ronald Reagan Republicans. And of course, John Anderson was a significant independent then as well. And on the eve of the election day, I believe they had Carter ahead by 2 points. We know what happened. It was a landslide for Reagan. I guess what I'm asking you, Joel, do you think the polls are spot on, or are we in for a real November surprise come election night?
I think the polls are accurate for the most part, and they are showing Trump with a slight advantage. Of course, it depends which poll you look at, but the New York Times Siena poll, which is thought to favor Democrats, shows Trump with a 1-point lead. It has caused panic among the Democrats because the direction that Kamala Harris is moving in at the moment is downward. Now, she could change that after the debate tonight, but Kamala Harris has been losing steam because people want to see more of what she stands for. There was a Boston University poll that showed that the Democrats have been very effective in driving up Trump's negative numbers. That is to say, making voter impressions of him worse than they were before the Democratic National Convention. But they did not use their convention well to drive up Kamala Harris's positive numbers. Voters still don't know much that's positive around Kamala Harris, except for her identity as a Black politician, female politician, Asian politician, whatever she is. And that's what's driving some of the support for her, but it's not enough. People want to know what she's going to do. And so I think the polls actually understate Trump's potential because Trump is running a winning style of campaign. It doesn't guarantee he's going to win. But when you look at what he's doing, he's talking about big national issues. He's projecting leadership. He's optimistic. He seems very confident. Of course, there was that dramatic recovery from the assassination attempt. So he's got a tremendous amount of positive energy, even if he's criticizing Kamala Harris and talking about what a terrible state the country's in. The overall energy in his campaign is positive, it's hopeful. Make America great again. It reaches into the past to promise a better future. Kamala Harris's campaign is different. It's what you might call in football a prevent defense. So she came in thinking almost that she was protecting a lead. And all of the choices she's made have been to keep the progressive left on board in some way. So rather than, for example, picking a swing state governor like Josh Shapiro to be her running mate, she chose a left-wing governor from a reliably Democratic state, Tim Walz of Minnesota. And she also did that because she didn't want to antagonize the anti-Israel faction within the Democratic Party, which doesn't like Shapiro. So she has made all these choices to keep everyone who's already within the circle inside the tent, but she has not done very well at reaching out. Now, for all that, progressives still feel somewhat betrayed by these reports. And by the way, they're only reports. We haven't heard her say in her own words that she has changed her mind on these policies. It's mostly just the campaign putting out statements that she no longer believes in banning fracking and things like that. But the progressives are starting to get a little irritated that they're expected simply to show up for her when she's not showing up for them rhetorically, so to speak. But I don't think that she can win. Well, let me put it this way. Her chances of winning are slimmer because of the way she's running a campaign. She's appealing to the Democratic base. It worked for Obama as an incumbent in 2012. Unfortunately, even though she is an incumbent, she doesn't have Obama's character or charisma or magnetism, and she doesn't have the virtue of actually sitting in the Oval Office. She doesn't have the sort of presidential or air around her. So I don't think it works. I just think she's running a losing campaign. Again, it doesn't mean she's going to lose, but it does mean, to me at least, that when you see her neck and neck with Trump in the polls, I think there's room for her to fall, and she's not creating room for herself to grow. Whereas I think Trump is. Trump is moving in a direction that allows him more growth. I think the endorsement of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was very big. He attracted a lot of independent voters. He's now telling them they have to vote for Trump, that Kamala Harris is everything that they and that the liberal left once abhorred. He's calling her the candidate of war. I mean, that's going to bring in at least some of the people on the left to vote for Trump simply because he's against a corrupt establishment that the far left doesn't like just as much as the conservatives don't. And I just think that Trump's got greater potential down the stretch. Again, everything could change tonight. Kamala Harris's campaign has taken a huge gamble by putting so much emphasis. Just one debate, no media appearances except for that joint interview on CNN a few weeks ago. If it goes well, they'll be described as political geniuses. If it does not go well or if it fails, it will be seen as one of the greatest campaign mistakes in history.
Joel, I know that you have to go. I know you have a hard out, but please tell our viewers where they can find more of the work that you do and the analysis that you give.
Well, you can find it in two places. You can find it at Breitbart.com, and our team is going to be covering the debate live. So if you follow along, you'll get all our fact checks, our up-to-the-minute reports, and so forth. The team is really ready to go as I speak. Everybody's super excited, chomping at the bit to get going. And then the other place is I've got a new book out called The Agenda, What Trump Should Do in His First 100 Days. And I've set out a list of policy changes, executive orders, and so forth that Trump can enact right away as soon as he takes office. And I encourage people to check it out. It's available on Amazon.com.
Joel, I just appreciate you so much. Thanks for coming on the show. But please don't try to steal our viewers like that. It's not fair.
You can watch The Rebel, and you can follow along on your computer or on your phone or whatever other device you have and read the Breitbart commentary.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you so much, Joel. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So before we bring Abby back, another message from our friends at Rumble. If you have a dog, and you know I do, she's under my desk currently. Her name is Morgan. She's the super dog of the farm. We've all been there. Our pup goes from full of energy to sick and miserable in an instant, and at the worst of times. Then we're calling vets in the middle of the night or on the weekends, trying to find a clinic that will take us in. It's a terrible way to manage your dog's health, not to mention your own stress levels and your monthly budget. Vets are so expensive. I'm a farmer. These things I know. It's a terrible way to manage your dog's health. And that's why people are getting the Pet Emergency Kit by Positive. It contains critical medications and supplies that can not only keep you out of the veterinary office, but may even save your dog's life. These kits contain critical medications like activated charcoal, septic powder, styptic powder, and more. It might save your dog's life. Head on over to Positive, that's PAWSITIVE.com, and use coupon code STUDIO to get 15% off your pet emergency kit. All right. Do we have our friend Abby back? We've got a super chat here for David Menzies from, the name is My Name is Trevor. It's $10. It's for David Menzies. I think these people just give me money so that I say nice things to David Menzies. David, journalists well, because you'd have to pay me to do it, right? David, journalists like you don't exist anymore. Your style is so unique. Well, that's one way of putting it. And you are a gift to Canada. Please wait 30 years to retire. Sincerely, Abby and
What
Sheila.
do you 110?
Yeah. Let the man go to pasture. It says Abby and Sheila are second place. Sorry, not sorry.
Wow. Well, my name is Trevor. That is just so kind. Thank you so much. And thank you for your donation too. You've made my day. I had a bit of a rough day earlier. I was apprehended by police, and then the OLG threatened to call the police. So 2 police actions in one day, just for simply, in one case, just walking my dog, Sir Gregor. And I'm going to have to look into that product you were plugging, Sheila.
Positive.
Sounds pretty good. But thank you so much. My name is Trevor. And listen, before we get right to the debate, here's the big question I have for 2 of you. We ran out of time, so I couldn't ask it to Joel. But so many political analysts, Vangelis, they are saying this election is basically going to boil down to the 7 swing states. That would be Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, North Carolina, Nevada, Arizona. And it could be as few as 500,000 votes, where those votes go, determining who's going to be the president. What are your thoughts?
Let's go to Abby first.
Sorry, I wasn't
paying attention.
There is literally a war breaking out on Melbourne streets. It's insane what's happening. Sorry, what was that, Mr. Menzies?
I'll answer it, and then maybe we'll go to that clip of Kamala so that Avi can figure out if his community is burning down. So moreover to your point, David, I think we're going to see a lot of what we saw in 2016, where people are voting for dinner table issues, jobs. The same thing is unfolding in Canada right now: jobs, public safety, inflation, taxes, affordability, immigration. I think that's what people are going to care about. And so at the end of the day, you may be a dyed-in-the-wool Rust Belt Democrat, but you will vote for the job of your husband and your son. And we saw a lot of that in 2016. I think we're going to see that in 2025 in Canada. I think we're going to see it in 2024 in the United States, in these swing states, which are largely industrial states. You know that Kamala Harris is already thinking about that. She knows that that's what the voters are thinking about. Why? Because her campaign is saying she rolled back her previous unscientific views on fracking. That's a Pennsylvania issue.
The thing is, Sheila, I can tell you this. Last weekend, I was in Ohio for a couple of days, and I would never base a prediction on election signs, but it was pretty much neck and neck. I would give the edge to Trump signs versus Kamala Harris signs. But one thing you notice is the further you get out of the city and more into rural areas, it's almost as though farmers are painting Trump on their tractors, for goodness sakes. And it just speaks, I think, to the great divide, city mouse, country mouse.
Story of my life, big guy. That's the story of my life. But I feel like that you people are aliens living in the city. I'm like, why don't you see the same things that I do? And why do you keep controlling my life?
And that's the thing. Even a state like Illinois, you take Chicago out of the equation, I think that can go red. New Jersey, you take Camden and Newark out of the equation, it goes red. It's just, it's just an observation I saw on the weekend that I've been pondering. And again, wouldn't base any prediction on lawn signs, but there you go. I think we are about to kick off in less than a minute.
We're just about to kick it off, but before we do, I joked in our pregame staff meeting that if we had a drinking game, it would be uh, drink every time Kamala says unburdened. And there's a
Why are we
reason
doing
for
that?
that. No, I have to work quite early in the morning and I just can't work with a hangover. So let's throw to a clip of her just saying this one phrase that makes absolutely zero sense over and over. And she thinks she's so clever and so charming and so funny when she says it, because she does that like pause at the end, like, you get me, people, you get me. This is profound. Are you listening? She does that. So let's throw to that and we'll go to the debate, hopefully.
Imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been. You know?
What can
You know?
be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be
What does it
unburdened
actually
by what
mean?
has been. What can be unburdened by what has been. What we can see, what we believe can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
Who we can be unburdened by who we have been. What can be
What does it
unburdened
actually
by
mean?
what has been. Where we can be
Is it just that I'm Australian? We don't understand English?
No, I believe
Okay.
that I speak the Queen's English, or at least a hillbilly version of it, and I have no idea what that woman is trying to say. But she thinks if she throws in the hand gestures and then the like, you get me? You get me? This is profound. Then she thinks that everybody is really with her, that she's just like crack the code somehow. I don't think she knows what she's saying, to be frank with you.
Well,
But like, imagine saying something stupid once, and then you
Just
thought,
running with it, just going it, making
So
it your whole
yeah, somebody's
personality.
told her that sounds good. That sounds profound. It's insightful. Like sometimes I watch back things that I said, and it's like a word sandwich, and I go, oh, please don't ever repeat
I
that.
just
Don't ever do that.
cringe. It's a full body cringe. And she has made this phrase her entire personality.
well, to quote Kirk Douglas in the later stages of his life, what are you saying? I can't make heads or tails of it. And you know, Sheila, it reminds me of the debate with Biden. I thought Trump's best line, and he had a few zingers, was when Biden said something incomprehensible and Trump came back and he said words to the effect of, I don't understand what he just said, and I don't think he does either.
But that's a day-to-day problem with Joe Biden. What did he say? Do we have the clip
I
of
can't
him saying that he's going to do 9/11 tomorrow? The clip, do we have that while we have 2 minutes to count down on the clock before the debate begins?
2-minute warning.
Yeah, it's less than that. I think it's about 1:30. The moderators are doing just the blabbity blah and the rules. I hope there are no rules. Well, let's show this clip here. He's going to do 9/11 to us, you guys. So George Bush is like, that's my thing, guys. Anyway, let's watch.
The debate, and tomorrow I'm doing 9/11. I spoke to the vice president. She seems calm, cool, and collected. I think she's going to do great, and I'm not going to say what advice I gave. The debate, and tomorrow I'm doing
his press secretary, Jean-Pierre or whatever. Look at her. She's like, dang, I got to get in here.
He's not worried about how Harris is going to do today. I'm just going to call her Harris. It's easier than trying to pronounce her first name.
Yeah.
And there's not very long that we have to know her name for, but he thinks she's going to do very well. This is the same guy that thought he did very well in the last debate, yeah?
Right. But even if she doesn't, he's going to 9/11 us tomorrow, so it doesn't matter.
Oh, here we go.
I think we're live.
I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion. One of them is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that Xi and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy. And the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response. And you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of but if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions, very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came to your desk?
Well, I won't have to because, again, 2 things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea, and how unfair that would have been. Part of the reason they lost to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free, but they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. So wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years, they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer the question? Would you
because
veto?
Under Roe v.
Answer
Wade,
the question, would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill, which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first. And I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country. And it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country. And if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
The people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying
manager.
their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris,
out.
I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you. Because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people who's were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper, he was no good, I fired him, so he writes a book. Another one writes a book, because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier. So let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the
Harris,
FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation
We do have a lot
that went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on longstanding work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down. And name calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your response?
First of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish one thing so important, in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead. Fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that
for
we
the
have to get
environment
to.
that
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
you. You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the president of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, The president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this, you talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The president of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
that.
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about it. An election is fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls. And we have to have it. We have to have borders and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them Republican.
No judge looked at it.
And said
they
was
said
no
we didn't have standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart, Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that, but he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I
up.
think we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror, and they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on
Vice
national
President
security,
Harris.
including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
Hey, well, I think that's going exactly how I thought it would. Couple of cackles there. But while the broadcaster goes to break, we've got a message from our partners at Rumble, who have a great way to support the work that they do to defend free speech. It's Rumble Premium. So as I said, this sponsorship is from our friends at Rumble, and it's one that's incredibly important to the survival of their company, especially in these times of intense censorship. When Rumble first started in 2013, they built the platform for the small creator. They didn't censor or have biases. They were fair and they treated all creators equally. No one thought at the time that platforms would censor political conversation or censor opinions on COVID. But as you know, they absolutely did. Facebook even admitted they fell to the pressure from the Biden and Harris administration. We have our own documents showing that social media platforms fell to Trudeau's pressure to take down posts that the government found disagreeable. Rumble, however, did not. They held the line. They are attacked daily for giving us a voice to talk to you. They're attacked in corporate media. They're attacked by governments like France. They're attacked from brand advertisers who refuse to work with them. Corporate America is fighting to remove speech, but Rumble is fighting to keep it. Rumble won't survive with just brand advertisers. They don't get much of it. Watching our show right now on Rumble is the most that they can ask from you. But if you really believe in this fight, and of course, if you have the means, because it's never, I think, been harder out there, I think in recent memory in both of our countries, America and the United States, to make ends meet. Your dollar just does not seem to go as far as it used to. One major way you can help Rumble survive is by joining Rumble Premium. So join the community that believes in the First Amendment and believes in our human right to free speech. Rumble is offering Rumble's offering $10 off with the promo code STUDIO when you purchase an annual subscription. Go to rumble.com/premium and use the promo code STUDIO. Like I said, if you have the means and believe in the cause, now's the time to join Rumble Premium. But if you don't have the means, we are just happy if you watch us on Rumble and if you make Rumble your preferred platform to watch videos. David Menzies, Avi Yamini, what do you guys think?
Well, right off the bat, Sheila, Kamala Harris began by saying there's a shortage of homes and housing. Golly, why would that be? Whether the figure is 50 million or more than 21 million illegal migrants coming into the U.S., do you think that might have an impact on housing? Some other notable
I hope she finds the person in charge responsible for all of this. Like, isn't she the border czar?
Well, anyway. She was the border czar, but that's not fashionable anymore. So she had nothing to do with the border. She's the potential first woman president of the United States. Just until July 21st, the word woman was very unfashionable. You had a female Supreme Court justice in the U.S. who said she can't possibly define the word woman. So it's amazing how things change. Also, January 6th, I knew that was going to come up as the threat to democracy. And I think Donald Trump scored major points by stating a matter of fact that he offered to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington 10,000 National Guard troops to provide security. They said no. Why would you say no to that? What do you have to lose in terms of having too much security, too much policing? Absolutely nothing unless you wanted a certain degree of anarchy. She calls Trump wanting to be a dictator, and yet Donald Trump made some very valid points how they've thrown democracy to the wind by getting rid of Biden, who had millions of votes, and basically coronating Kamala Harris.
David,
And,
I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to give Avi a chance before
absolutely.
we have to go back into the debate because I don't know how long the break is. You're muted again, buddy. Nothing
So
from Abby. Hey.
for
There you are.
For me, a couple of things stood out from the beginning. Firstly, I found it very bizarre that she was claiming that he thanked Xi Jinping during COVID when he should have held them to account or condemned them for releasing for the leak. He was the one that coined it, China virus, and he got condemned at the time.
Right.
The debate's back on. So let's get back into that. But that was the first thing that stood out to me.
You get to go first on the next
You
break.
have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more, because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left. I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's. Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here,
threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president, you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strong men instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this. And the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words. So I'm asking.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. Up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
Honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young Black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5, took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first Black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your third time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country, one who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page.
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's
Trump,
turn back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She has
please.
a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move
to
on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
Thank you,
That's
Mr.
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
No,
because
Trump,
the
President
former
Trump.
president has
No,
said
I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry. We're
I just
gonna
need to
move on,
respond
Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this is
multiple
now
times.
your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better.
Correct.
Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan? And can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, We're going to do it, and we're going to replace it. But remember this. I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private healthcare options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being you don't like him, you said at the time, because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice
Fastest
President
prologue
Harris, thank
in terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot
She made a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable, but we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
All right. We let David have his say during the last break. We'll go to Avi now. Avi, what do you think about what has unfolded before us these last 90 or so minutes? You're muted again. We're going to get it right next time.
There we go. There we go. We'll be right for the end of it. Yeah, to be honest, it's wild. It is Trump debating three people. At times, it seems like Harris is the moderator.
Right.
You know, and I'm just looking at things she's sadly, I think Harris is doing better than I thought she would, to be fair.
Me too.
I feel like Trump is not landing as hard as I would have hoped. There were glimpses of excitement where you think, here comes Trump, and he landed a couple of little ones. But I dare say that if you're watching it and you're a Trump supporter, you're going to say he's won. If you're watching it and you're a Harris supporter, you're probably going to think she's won. So I don't know so far that this is going to change really anything. Parts to point out, you know, she keeps saying that he has no plan, but then says his plan is Project 2025. He has no economic plan. He says he has nothing to do with Project 2025. But you can't have it both ways. Is it Project 2025 is his plan, or he has no plan. There's just lie after lie. The ABC moderators, if we can call them that, are essentially fact-checking him and debating him on so many issues, but letting her get away with every single repeated lie, including Charlottesville. Look, it's been a disappointing debate for a few reasons so far for me, including, and now it's basically the end, including the fact that it was 3-on-1, but we knew it was going to be 3-on-1.
Right.
Trump knew it was going to be 3-on-1. I feel he went in very soft, and we haven't got to see the real Trump we know and love.
Right. I don't know if that was calculated. Like I agree with you that, you know, it is a 3-on-1 debate. They are fact checking Trump in real time, and also getting that wrong. It's quite
falsely
bizarre.
fact checking. Yeah.
Falsely fact checking him in real time. She's just getting away with whatever she wants to say. But like as a Trump fan, I would have liked to have seen more of that Trump fire. He is the most hilarious, entertaining politician in modern history, and I'm not seeing it. Like, you know, when I was expecting more of, you know, I thought we were going to get a glimpse more of it when he said, "You are Biden." That should have been the story of the whole debate. Listen, sister, all these problems last 4 years that you think you're going to fix, you're in the administration that made them. I don't think we should trust you to fix them. I expected more of that. I just didn't see it. But I hope we all find somebody who loves us the way Kamala Harris loves aborting babies. I can't believe they spent like 25 minutes of the debate debating something that is now in the hands of the state. I mean, she's just so passionate about this. And Trump is right. This is not something he's going to legislate on, because it's up to the individual states, the way it always should have been. But, you know, these moderators just let Kamala Harris create these worst case scenarios that absolutely don't exist.
The Afghanistan question, she just refused to answer the question, are you responsible? Because she knows how guilty she is. There has been some wild moments in that I don't think Trump kind of capitalized in the old Trump way. I don't know. Look, it would be hard to debate when your mic's off, especially when you're Trump and you're quick-witted and you can quickly come up with those little snarky comments, which is the reason why they shut his thing down. But I just loved how when it came to Hamas, when it came to the Israel, she goes, "I support Israel and I support Hamas." I want to say now, any Jew voting for that now, voting for that should never visit Israel. They should visit an insane asylum.
Right. Oh, I think we're back.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us, and we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them Are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
We can shut down ABC, can't we?
I believe we can. I think we have a couple of our own ads to do, and then we'll wrap up, I think, with our final thoughts. I think the story of the night was just Kamala Harris lying and Trump being more subdued than I would have liked to have seen. But I know that Efron mentions to me in our team chat here that we have to do a couple of ads, and then we'll go to our final thoughts and if we have any chats to clean up at the end.
It's the news event of the year. Canada's most controversial premier sits down with Canada's most controversial journalist, and everything is on the table. Come watch Ezra Levant one-on-one with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith in front of a live studio audience in Calgary. Nothing's off limits. Nothing's held back. Questions that would make Justin Trudeau invoke martial law. Answers that will make Stephen Guilbeault pee his pants. You're not going to want to miss this one, but you have to be there in person at the Rebel News Live mega conference in Calgary on October the 5th. Tickets are limited, so drop everything and go to rebelnewslive.com right now. Special discounted prices for Patriots and special extra high prices if you're with the CBC. Go to rebelnewslive.com now.
I'm in Brazil, so I'm using a VPN to get on the internet. What's a VPN? It stands for a virtual private network, and you get around these government firewalls. Suddenly, the president of Brazil banned his whole country from going on Twitter. It was a political censorship news. I've downloaded the VPN from a company called PIA VPN. We've teamed up with them at Rebel, and it's a great deal. I got on the internet really quickly, safely, and even I'm a bit of a technophobe. I managed to figure it out with 2 clicks. And here's the great news. If you go to piavpn.com/Rebel News, not only do you get a big discount, but they pay us a bit of a commission too. Everyone's a winner. Your freedom your VPN and a little bit of cash coming to support Rebel News. I'm using it myself to get around the censors in Brazil. You can use it too. That's piavpn.com/Rebel News.
Hey guys, we have one chat, someone who felt bad for myself and Avi after flattering David Menzies. My name is Trevor, gives us $10 Canadian. I think roughly the same as $10 Australian. And he says, as an Albertan, Sheila has my heart. And as someone who wants world peace, I'm glad we have Avi. Menzoid got a 10, but he's too good. So here's 5 for Sheila and 5 for Avi. So anyways, thanks for the pity.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
Yeah, you know what? That's how I got married. So it's okay. These things have worked out for me. We do. Let's go to David. David, what did you think about the second half of that debate?
Yeah, and thank you to Trevor for sending along some more do-re-mi. I agree with Avi, the moderators, David Moore and Lindsay Davis. Clearly, this was home field advantage for Kamala Harris. As I stated at the top of the show, ABC, according to the Media Research Center, from July 21st till September 6th, gave Kamala Harris a gravity-defying 100% positive spin in their coverage. Donald Trump got a 93% negative spin. That's not journalism. That's propaganda. So we knew what we're getting into. And, she could have been challenged on a couple of profound points, I think, Sheila and Navy. First of all, you're talking about, enforcing the border, employing more agents doing the heavy lifting. Well, you were the border czar these last almost 4 years, and suddenly, there was a miscommunication, had nothing to do with that. That's poppycock. You know it, we know it, everybody knows it. Saying you're a supporter of Israel, and Netanyahu comes all the way over to the U.S., goes to Congress, and you snub him. Why? What was more important than being there on that day? I think Trump said something about going to some sorority reunion or something. Well, that's just not good enough. It was a good thing that Trump got the. Oh, by the way, another thing to address that Avi brought up, Afghanistan, where incredibly, I have to disagree with Avi. She wasn't sort of muddling about that. She said verbatim, I agree with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. That is astonishing. This has to be the most deplorable fiasco in terms of a military unit getting out of a country. You had 13 American soldiers die on that day. The U.S., as well as Canada, by the way, we threw our allies, our interpreters, under the bus, leaving them to the mercy of the Taliban. And as Donald Trump said, $85 billion of state-of-the-art, brand new military equipment left behind. I mean, if you're going to pull out, why couldn't you ship out that equipment? Why not only lose $85 million of hardware, but surrender it to the Taliban? And look at what Afghanistan is like today. Also, her talking about, freedom of one's body, she called abortion.
Right.
What happened? And that's a variation of the chestnut, my body, my choice.
Exactly.
What happened to that during the COVID-19 vaccine mandates? No, we don't talk about my body, my choice anymore. I think the funniest line she said is, we're going to help you buy a car seat. Maybe one for President Biden, just so he doesn't fall out of out of the limousine. And I think in her final remarks, guys, when she was saying her attitude to the American people is to ask them the question, are you okay? And by the way, what if people go, no, I'm being evicted. I've lost my job. I can't pay the grocery bills. I can't afford gasoline. What's she going to do about it? She just said, I'm going to ask a question. Are you okay? And it reminded me of, remember the Saturday Night Live character, Stuart Smalley? His saying, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. That's what that reminded me of. But in the final analysis, I think you're right, Sheila. Trump, well, neither candidate for that matter. I don't think, in any debate, you want to find the knockout punch moment. And I don't think we saw it on that debate by either candidate. And at the end of the day, all I have to say with Kamala Harris, are you buying what she's selling? I'm not. I'm judging her by her record. I'm judging her by her previous actions. And as we talked about at the beginning of the broadcast, Bernie Sanders just 2 days ago essentially said, don't worry, she's just saying what she needs to get elected. That I find very disturbing. I think in my lifetime, certainly, this is the most important U.S. election ever. It might be the most important U.S. election in U.S. history since perhaps the Civil War. And I don't think I'm overstating it. And, well, there's less than 60 days until November 5th. And we will we'll just have to see what happens there. But again, as much as Kamala Harris was trying to come across as caring and sharing and a female version of Stuart Smalley, I'm sorry, Sheila. I'm sorry, Abby. I ain't buying what she's selling.
No, she somehow thinks the company or the country needs group therapy and not a proper president. Like, are you okay? No, Kamala, we're not. We're not.
What are you going to do
Help
about
us? Yeah. Close the border. Abby, what did you think?
No, it's wild. And look, I got to give her credit. She didn't fumble it like I expected her to.
Me too. Dang it, I'm disappointed.
It was home ground, and I knew that, and I thought, still, it's live. She's going to fumble it. She remembered all her talking points. She memorized them really well. So I don't think she won or lost. I don't think either of them won or lost that debate, to be fair. I think it was just, if anyone lost anything, it was Trump, because we expected, I was expecting a knockout win, or I was hoping, I guess, for a knockout win, and it definitely wasn't that. Will it change anything in the polls? I don't think so.
But you know what, guys? What I'll find fascinating is some 12 hours from now, when the papers come out and the op-ed pieces and the propaganda meisters in the mainstream media calling this a Kamala Harris victory.
A landslide victory. Absolutely.
Yeah. As sure as there's salt water in the Pacific Ocean, I think you're going to see that.
Look, to be fair, they're probably right. Anything less than what happened to Biden last time is what they will count as an absolute victory. She was still able to walk off the stage. She was fine.
Right. She could have walked out there, squawked, and laid an egg.
Exactly.
And the mainstream media is still going to say, she looked presidential out there. It was funny. I thought it was kind of funny where Trump was like, look, she can be whatever she wants to be. I would have been like, you know what? She can identify however she wants. Isn't that what they keep telling our kids? But it was interesting to see, the party of DEI accusing Donald Trump of dividing people by race and class. I thought that was
That's
interesting.
the thing that, I think half of it was just the regular culture war, or just the same arguments that people have a view either way. Like, it wasn't really anything groundbreaking. It wasn't going to convince.
I don't think anybody's convinced.
Yeah, I don't think it convinced anyone of anything. Like, well, I guess the only thing possibly that came out of that is that an undecided that thought that Kamala couldn't even keep up a conversation for an hour and a half, couldn't stand on her own 2 feet. Maybe now they look at that and they go, well, actually, she's able to do it. She's able to do it. So I guess, the mainstream media may be right to claim it as a victory for her, not on the facts, but on the fact that this is the first time she's been live in front of anyone, and she didn't just crash and fall like many of us would have expected.
But
her
then
4
again,
days
Abby,
in the bunker.
But Avi, then again, the bar was so remarkably low
Exactly.
after the July debate.
100%, I agree with you, 100%. But I'm looking at it. I'm not looking at it from somebody I'm trying to look at it from a non-partisan position, from somebody that is not convinced that, maybe their fear with Harris was she's not tried and tested. She cannot stand on her own 2 feet. The only time she had to do an interview was 40 minutes, not live. They cut it down to 18, and she had to sit with Tim Waltz next to her. The thing here is really, she wasn't there on her own 2 feet. She was backed by another two. It was a 3-on-1, but I dare say that voter that's undecided, that their only fear, and I'm assuming that there are some that their fear is she couldn't handle it on her own. She couldn't handle. They may not see the fact that it was 3-on-1. They may look at that and go,
right.
Well, maybe we should give her a chance. Maybe it's Biden that's been holding her back the whole time.
Well,
right.
That is always
white
the
man
problem.
keeping her under his thumb.
And that is always the problem when you're talking to people who only get their information from the mainstream media. But one last point I should point out, Donald Trump made one line about this, but I think he should have probed deeper. When Kamala Harris was talking about, was hectoring Donald Trump about the Affordable Care Act, I think there was a great opportunity to go after her in terms of, going after wokeness, and that being, why do you support transgender surgery for convicted prisoners in jail? Why do you support transgender surgery for illegal aliens? And that is the fact of the matter. She does support that. Taxpayer-funded operations, really for the worst of the worst, is where does affordable health care come into getting free surgeries for the pretend people, especially if, in a worst case, you're an illegal alien and a convicted felon at once, and no problem. You want to go from Jim to Joan. The U.S. taxpayer will pay that. I think that would have been a great opportunity for Donald Trump to say, how do you justify that?
There was a lot of missed opportunities like that where I think he could have really won the audience by just being more himself.
Yeah.
And, a bit of the banter, a bit of the.
Yeah, I think what makes him great is he's so sharp on his feet.
Yeah.
And it seemed like he was really holding himself back. And maybe that was calculated. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems calculated.
Yeah.
It's like the advice, behave yourself.
Yeah.
Look reasonable, Donald.
Yeah, and I just feel like it's odd that he followed that advice, because I don't think that normally he would. But maybe he was doing the same thing she was and making the appeal to the undecided voter.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
If you're MAGA, you're MAGA already. But if you are like, I want to vote for Trump, but he's a little too rough around the edges, crass, wild, and unpredictable, and he says some things that I wouldn't want to hear. You turn up to this debate and you're like, wait, he didn't do any of that stuff. Maybe he is okay for me.
That's true. That's the counter argument, I think, to what I was making a minute ago to Kamala. Like there may be undecided that think he's too wild and unpredictable, and this kind of this answered that issue. So it is true. That's why I say to you, like, I don't know. I feel like this whole debate today is not really going to have any impact either way, any real impact either way. I think, we were hoping for the knockout. That would have been a major win. We didn't get it, but doesn't change anything now. It's just, okay, back to the regular campaigning.
Except, Avi, to Sheila's point about the undecided vote, which I think will play a major role, as we were talking about earlier, Kamala Harris, since the DNC, she has slipped 7 points with independent voters. And this is very significant. 1/3 polled said this debate that we just saw will determine their vote. So maybe Donald Trump's advisors, if there is such a thing, said, listen, don't come across too harshly, because 1/3 of independent voters, which are already winning over, according to the current trend, are going your way. So maybe, as Joel Pollak said earlier, it was more of a prevent defense. Avi doesn't know what I'm talking about because the NFL isn't in Australia. Maybe they have a prevent defense with Australian rules football. I don't know. But
No,
maybe
that's
that
mayhem.
was the strategy behind that.
No,
Yeah,
you might be right. Well, I
yeah.
think over the next few days, it'll be interesting to see, not that the polls actually mean anything anymore, but it will give you an indication of which way it's going. And especially what I like about the polls is you read the mainstream media's polls and reporting on the polls, and you kind of get, if you can critically think and analyze it, remembering all those facts, you'll know in which way the trend is going. You won't understand. You may not know how far. So if they say, well, you know, if she drops in the polls a little bit according to them, then I would imagine that the hit is a lot harder. But if they're saying she's gained in the polls, I dare say it depends on what kind of numbers. If they're saying she gained a little bit, I'd argue that nothing's happened.
Let me ask the two of you a question. Was there one line by either candidate that stood out as a profound, as a knee slapper, a laugh out loud moment? Anything you remember from that last hour and a half plus that you can take away and think about?
I like when usually she said she is Biden. I think that should be his entire campaign slogan. She is Biden.
I like how he said "quiet, please."
Yes, a
quiet,
few times,
please. Like, it was halfway through it. Like, you just didn't. You know, the first half, especially, he was really subdued. It was just like I was almost getting bored of it, and then he fired up a little bit, and she started trying to talk over the microphone, and he just turned around and he goes, "Quiet, please." And also the line where he used her. What was it?
I'm talking now. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
I thought that was maybe one of his best lines, right?
Yeah, those were the moments. But like I said, you know, after a Biden Trump debate, whether it's with Biden or Clinton, you know, at the end of it, you were sitting there. You had 50 of those that you could roll off the top of your head. So I just don't think it was one of those debates. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't actually know. I don't know. We'll, you know, maybe they were maybe they were hoping that the advice was play it this way, so you're level-headed and you're cool. And if she's gonna totally blow it on her own, that's the win. That's the big win we'll take. But you're not going to be able to push her over that edge. And I'm sure that the advice that she got was expecting, and she was saying it, she was expecting him to be a lot more mean. With, you know, calling her all sorts of names. It was funny. At one point she said that he, you know, expect him to call me names. He's a disgrace. Wait, what? Like,
when?
I didn't see him. You could see he was consciously stopping himself from going down to that level, which, like Sheila says, it's that I imagine was the play. Was it the correct play? We're about to find out.
Well, you know, Avi, I think perhaps the meanest thing he said, and I'm not sure it's mean as in terms of insulting, as opposed to telling the truth. And that was when he was talking about Biden, and he used the phrase, he hates her, right? Which may indeed be the case. I am almost certain with my life, I would bet this, that Biden hates Nancy Pelosi for taking him out behind the shed and reading the riot act. Basically, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, you know, in terms of a dignified exit or a bloodbath. But you know what? That might be the case. Joe Biden might indeed still be utterly resentful that he is not the candidate going into November's election.
You're assuming he remembers, but okay.
I was going to say, I don't think he has the cognition to to even know what happened to him. He's just happily out there planning 9/11 for tomorrow.
And by the way, I see our producer has a social media posting from Donald Trump himself. I thought that was my best debate ever, especially since it was 3-on-1. Hey, he took your line, Avi. How do you like that?
Look, I think it was pretty obvious. I think the average person who watched that could see it was 3-on-1. It'll be interesting to see what nonpartisan people feel if they also saw it. I try to look at these things objectively to get out of my little bubble and out of my own head and go, how would I look at this if I was either on the other side or I was just somebody that was unsure? I think it was pretty obvious that it was 3-on-1. His best debate ever. Well, on what metric? Like, what are you basing that on? If a good debate is you being chill, that was your best debate ever.
Yeah.
I'd as somebody that came to be entertained tonight, that wasn't your best debate.
Well, you know what?
I was not entertained. That's the thing. I know we're approaching, like, it's after 11 o'clock in Toronto. 11
Well, I just want to say about that line. Don't forget Donald Trump, and I'm not saying this in a disparaging way. He is a promoter, and that posting best debate ever. It kind of reminds me, guys, back in I believe it was 1984. I was a journalism student, and I was doing a piece on Frank Tunney, who was the promoter for decades and decades of wrestling cards at Maple Leaf Gardens. And I'll never forget one of the questions I asked him. I said, Mr. Tunney, with all the wrestling cards and all these decades at Maple Leaf Gardens across the street from your office here, what was the best card ever? And you know what his answer was? My next one. Ever the promoter, right?
Right.
Yeah. No, and that's true. Like whatever that post on True Social is him. He's certainly riling up a conversation, even if he doesn't think it was his best debate. It's the way to go about it. But I was looking forward to the breaks to be entertained by you, Menzies. That's how bored I was. That's how desperate I was. I'm actually the guy that put the $10 in the beginning. Just to say.
Oh, you burst my bubble.
Guys, before we go, I know we have one more chat, so I'll just read that real quick. And it's Main Disgrace gives us $10 and says, Sheila, do you think Kamala Harris, will be the next POTUS?
That's not fair. Why are we calling her Hokta? I like the Hokta girl. I think she's a.
I bet you do. I bet you do.
I keep showing my wife that video. I think she's great.
I bet you did. We all know Kamala Harris slept her way to certain plateaus in her career. Will she be the next president of the United States? I'm skeptical. And we're streaming on YouTube, so there's things that I can't say about the electoral processes without getting us canceled. But if all things are fair, I just can't see it.
Yeah, and guys, I think one of the funniest nicknames she's acquired recently that's sort of making the rounds is Kamala Harris. And that's the question we have to ask of the last 90 minutes. Were we being scammed? Was she saying things she thought most Americans, or at least undecided Americans, wanted to hear? I think.
Are you saying she was identifying as a Nigerian prince in that last? So she's Jamaican, she's Indian, and she's Nigerian. Gotcha.
Abby, I swear that $4.5 million check is on its way. You just have to send another $5,000 processing fee.
Yeah, I'll send it right to you.
You got me.
So I think the consensus here, guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's no winner. Nobody won.
Yeah,
it was just
no
a
winner.
wash.
I don't think there's no winner. I think Trump felt like a bit of a loser of it. Does that define?
Do you know who's the loser? Me, because I expected more cackling. Because I thought I would have a lot of material for jokes throughout the week, and now I've got none. So thank you.
The joke's on us.
You robbed me. You robbed 90 minutes of my life, boring me.
Yeah. I think, and I'm trying to be as objective as possible. And I agree. I don't think she did as horrifically as I imagined she would. But if this was a boxing match scoring on points, and I had to make, the final decision. I give it to Trump simply because he kept mentioning his record of his achievements that he did in his regime. And like I said at the beginning, the question, as always in these elections, guys, are you better today than you were 4 years ago? And I say that in terms of inflation, gas prices, interest rates, world peace, employment, etc. So I think on that basis, and he hammered home those achievements, I give it to Trump. And I also, my spidey senses are tingling that Kamala Harris is not a genuine person.
No, really, David? Really?
I don't know where you get that from. That's just ridiculous. You made sense until that point.
Right. Now I know you're a liar.
So 2 ties for you and a slight victory for Trump for me. There you go. I guess that's the ultimate split decision after all, isn't it?
Yes. David, I will allow you the sign off tonight since I sort of led the show because I am in charge of when the ads come in and out. But I want to thank Abby for joining us on the live stream. I know David and I do this sort of stuff a couple of times a week, but it's been fun having our friend from Down Under join us, and I hope we get to do this.
I got
again
nervous when you guys kicked me off. I was like, was it something I said?
Yes.
It was just a power.
And then I realized that we hit the limit of Jews in the live stream. And
that's what I was going to say. We got to swap them out before people start having
and I mean,
theories about us.
I think the big winners overall are those who are able to read lips, because so many times Avi had his mic off and only a lip reader could understand what he was saying. So those were maybe the ultimate winners. But and I want to thank Avi for being there, because I saw some social media postings coming in and, oh, great. This debate has to happen on this day when your city is apparently falling apart. So maybe you're going to have to bugger off right after we get off the live stream, Avi.
We've got to check what's happening. And hopefully when you wake up in the morning, there is still Melbourne.
Or maybe it's going to be Mel burnt. See what I did?
But yes.
Oh, wow.
And
anyways,
as
folks,
far as I understand, it's mostly peaceful. All right.
Oh.
Well, anyways, I want to thank my co-host.
That could mean cars are burning.
Yeah, there you go. Sheila Gunn Reid, the wonder from Down Under, Avi Yamini, myself, David Menzies. I hope you enjoyed our coverage. It was a pleasure to bring it to you. We'll probably be back here on November 5th, election night, to do something similar. We'll see how things go then, of course. In the meantime, as always, stay safe and stay sane.